Right. All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Robin, can you please call roll?
Mr. Pahowitz,
Here.
Mr. McNulty,
Here.
Mr. Bellis,
Here.
Mr. Pierce,
Here.
Mr. Beer.
Here.
Staff, Robin Duffy, present. Legal counsel is here, Ms. Jennifer Huber. And we have Jeff Beard, our senior zoning officer.
Okay, so for new business, or is there anything, Robin, before we get started on this, or did you have? Okay. For new business, I guess we can just dive right into the RCOD amendments. All right. Robin, did you want to go through, or did you have anything for going through the staff comments from Delaware Regional or anything that you wanted to cover first?
No, not in particular. I'm happy to go over the staff report whenever you're ready.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. The summary being Orange Township Board of Trustees passed a resolution on September 20, 2021, which imposed a moratorium on the filing of all applications in the Orange Township Route 23 Corridor Overlay District until January 1. That was extended to July 1, 2022, in order for staff and legal counsel to review the 23 Corridor Overlay District and highlight any modifications that we would like to make. So as part of that, maps were changed. I think I'll take you through some of the textual changes first, and then we can review some of the maps. The commission does have printed copies of the maps in front of you as well. I apologize that those were not sent out farther in advance, but we just got those together. One of the bigger changes is that we have deleted the multifamily residential section of the overlay district. So essentially all those standards have been incorporated into the mixed use sub area. So some of those standards have changed, but it's essentially a mix of the old standards in mixed use as well as some of the standards from multifamily residential. Section 20.04, we did have some procedural changes. One thing that I would highlight, and this changes in a few different subsections, is that the timing and the schedule of submittal and hearings has changed. So the Zoning Commission will now schedule an RCOD work session within 45 days of each monthly submittal deadline, rather than 14 days as it was previously. Skipping down to that same schedule has been applied within 20.04G. So the trustees will also schedule and hold a public hearing within 45 days after the work session of an application rather than 30 days. So previously the schedule was the application deadline, 14 days for a zoning commission work session, and then 30 days for the board of trustees to hear it. That schedule has now been changed to 45 days for a zoning commission work schedule, and then 45 days for the board of trustees to hear it following that work session. 20.04C has been changed to reflect that recommendations included in a traffic impact study, or TIS, shall also be approved by the township in addition to approval from the permitting authority of the applicable roads. So previously it was whichever permitting authority applied for whichever right-of-way, whether it was the state or the county, that permitting authority would just have unilateral jurisdiction over the traffic impact study, and that language has been updated to give the townships latitude in approving those traffic impact studies as well. 20.04H, a condition of approval has been added. This subsection requires that no property in an application and development plan shall be included unless such property is located in a joint economic development district, or JED. So we did add the requirement that all applications for the RCOD overlay district must be included in either a current JED or a new JED. 20.04 N, item 5, which deals with the amount of landscaping and screening features required to constitute a major amendment. We added that. And as part of our discussion this evening, staff would like to request feedback from the Zoning Commission as to what constitutes a major amendment and what staff can approve administratively as a minor amendment. And then, speaking of amendments, the timeline for Board of Trustees to hear a major amendment has also been extended to 45 days, just to keep everything uniform. So if there is an existing plan district that came in with an amendment, the trustees would have 45 days to hear that within from the application date. Section 20.05, prohibited uses. Language was added, which prohibits fueling stations, auto-oriented uses, and standalone drive-through facilities. Section 20.06, commercial subareas. This was part of a definition update as well. It essentially just clarified the definition of transient hotels to refer to the Ohio Revised Code, and limiting them to a daily rate rather than an hourly or other rate. Section 20.08, mixed use. 20.08G, maximum lot coverage requirements decreased to 60% from decreased to 60% from 75%. That is something that previously the mixed use was 75%, but the requirement in the multifamily section of the code was 60%, and so ultimately we chose to keep the 60% requirement instead of the 75%. Section 20.09, general standards. A lot of this was smaller language, just in terms of cleaning up language, making it clearer. So in 20.09A, the language has been changed to refer to four-sided architecture when talking about buildings and architectural features rather than 365-degree architecture. In 20.09A, language has been added to permit roofs that have a pitched appearance and not just pitched roofs was the previous language. Additional restrictions were added for drive-throughs. 20.09B, we did change the standard for street trees. So going to every 25 feet, a street tree is required rather than every 30 feet. So decreasing the amount of space in between means more street trees. Coniferous trees or a combination of deciduous and coniferous trees are now permitted. I believe previously it was just deciduous trees. Language requiring landscaping within setback areas has been removed. We no longer require that. Language has been added in 20.09E concerning multi-use paths and sidewalks. We would like to refer to the county engineer office on this issue and make sure that we have their support on that. As of now, those conversations have not happened, but we will do that shortly. Language was also added in 20.09G that permits one monument sign along US 23 if there is no access granted. So they would have some signage if they are not directly on 23. And language was added in 20.09J to add crossbuck fence as a permitted type of fence. And finally, in section 20.12, definitions. Some of this we've covered already, but just kind of, again, clarifying and updating language. The definition of auto-oriented use has been updated. Language was changed in the way that we calculate lot widths. So on corner lots, the distance is now calculated between right-of-way for the lower classified road line and the side lot line. And previously it had been measured from the right-of-way line for the higher classified road and the side lot line. So just switching the way we measure lot width for corner lots. Drive-in movie theaters were added in the definition of standalone drive-through facility. Definition was updated for 3-family residential unit buildings. Language was changed, similar to the corner lot definition. just changing the definition in the sign area just to specify how that area is calculated. I believe the standards remain the same for that. And as I mentioned earlier, the definition of transient hotel was updated to refer to specific language in the Ohio Revised Code that discusses the definition of those transient hotels. Just to keep things simple, and since some of these are multi-page documents, we did have, usually we include Delaware County Regional Planning Commission's recommendation in the staff report, but we had it as a separate document for tonight's meeting. I won't go over all their comments. The majority of their comments have already been addressed. They did recommend conditional approval of the amendments to the 23 Corridor Overlay District, the DCRPC, Orange Township Zoning Commission, and Orange Township trustees, subject to their staff comments. And with your permission, I will go over the map briefly to show you the comparison of what was changed. So a lot of this was parcels that went from mixed use to the just the standard commercial office. So you can kind of see part of this in segment 1, the mixed use to the north of that remains mixed use. I would note that some of those single family parcels on Shanahan Road were previously included in the overlay district. We have taken some of them out, except for 1 or 2, which I believe will serve as access points for a proposed development that is in that mixed use area. But the rest of those single family parcels have been removed from the overlay district. And you can see a lot of the mixed use areas have become the standard commercial office, essentially north of Lewis Center Road all the way up to the mixed use area that borders on Shanahan. Directly south of that, again, you can see a lot of area went from mixed use to the commercial office district. We did keep some of the mixed use areas in there, but largely the mixed use went to just the standard commercial office. And then finally, the southern portion, similar themes. It was these mixed use areas along US 23 on the east side do remain mixed use, but a fair amount of the parcels on the west side of US 23 have changed from mixed use to commercial office. The advanced manufacturing, logistics, R&D, or industrial, whatever you want to call that area, that largely remains the same. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the staff.
Where did this whole overlay come from? Who wrote all this, and what? I see all the changes from the original, which we'll get into that here in a minute. But who wrote all this? Where did this come from?
That is an excellent question. I will say that I have been here for 1 month, and all of those changes occurred before my time here. Ms. Huber, do you have any?
So the original document was prepared, the original text was prepared by a consultant that the township hired to help, and I think worked with DCFA as well, and some of that generation. The changes that have happened since then have been legal counsel, staff, anything that's come up since the enactment of the first version that we sort of like put in the back of our minds and said, hey, we want another crack at this. So that's what we've been.
All right, what happens to all those projects that were just recently approved that don't fit into this?
Yeah.
You know, just the one we just did the last time that has the gas station, PJ's. And, you know, the other multifamily on the west side, which is under construction, they're on Owen Field. You know, so there's lots of projects that have happened when this was shut down versus this document showing up today.
My understanding this is an overlay and that you can still apply under traditional zoning. Is that correct?
Yep.
Are the examples you just gave, are they under the overlay? Are they under?
The one was approved under the overlay. That was Cheswick Village. That was why the overlay was in place originally.
Condos there on Owenfield.
Yep, on Owenfield. And
Yeah.
then the one that
BJ's.
the BJ's is not part of the overlay. That was part of a regular rezoning process.
And then there was a Sheets.
Sheets was part of the overlay.
Right. And now would not be. Now would
Correct.
now would not qualify, but did at the time.
Correct.
We don't need to get into that, but the other thing I've heard and saw here is, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but maybe it does if somebody explains it, is that I heard the part about trees every 30 feet or every 25 feet, but no landscaping is required.
But there's landscaping standards in here. The previous version had street trees and landscape trees. So there were spots where they had to put 30 trees within 100 feet because of being on a corner lot. It changed. There was like overkill on the number of trees next to the road.
And I think the other provision that I heard from Robin was there used to be a requirement that there be a certain level of landscaping in the setback.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that came up because there are some businesses, you will not remember there at Hidden Ravines. You know, those business on the east, commercial on the east side of 23 had gotten away for a long time without putting any of the landscaping that was required by zoning. Is that now out? They don't have to do that any longer?
No, this is just the previous one had two different sets of street trees. So it had street trees and then landscape trees. So depending on how your building was set and your parking, the street trees and landscape trees would double the number of trees that you needed. So it was hard for the developers to fit that many trees in with our spacing requirements and the location of it and the parking. So this is still requiring the trees, but then we also still have the other landscape standards that are, you know, if there's headlight buffering, they have to have a continuous head blocking the headlights along parking areas and still have the other landscape standards. Just
I got a question about the trees before we get off the trees. So is there something within here, if a utility comes in and trims back the trees, are they going to be hit on that, or how are we going to police that? Or do we have a plan? So City of Columbus, for example, it's $200 an inch. So if you go in and you trim a tree that's within the Columbus right away, it's part of their tree initiative, they charge you $200 an inch in utility. So do we have, because the developer is going to put up a tree, right? Utility's going to come in. You can't have a tree over 15 foot within a utility right away. So they come in and they trim it, they take that tree out. So are we going to, go against the developer because that tree's not there? Do we have anything within our?
Oh, is there a requirement? I guess if your question is there a
Yeah.
requirement that they replace the tree?
Correct. How are we going to enforce that in a sense?
currently, they are supposed to replace any dead trees or landscaping that occurs.
Yeah.
But my understanding also is we're not putting trees in the right of way.
No,
We're
they're not in the right of way, but they could be utility
could-
easements
they
for-
could.
Yeah, there could be utility easements in that. Most of your utility easements anymore are within the road right away. They've moved them out.
So-
Because
so yeah.
generally I was under the impression you don't put anything in an easement either, because it could be, like you said, cut down,
Yeah.
torn down, whatever purpose. But it needs to be on.
Plus, trees grow into.
Well, I can't do anything about a tree growing into it.
Right.
But I'd like to think
Yeah.
it's gonna take a while before a tree actually grows into an easement or a right of way.
Yeah, you'd be surprised they fast growing trees for years of that.
I have a question just about the consultant, making these recommendations and all this inquiry, where did this come from? But I thought there was an expectation that we would meet them, right? And they would kind of talk with us about their process and their thought process and how things are. I don't think, maybe I missed it. Did we
So-
meet and greet
yeah,
with them
so-
and have
so
a
you're-
conversation?
Yeah, you're getting confused with the overall zoning code rewrite.
Okay.
So this
So this is a different
this was-
consulting group.
this was done with a consultant previously, the first version
Last
of
year,
it.
2 years ago.
And then once we got put on the moratorium, then we haven't worked with a consultant since then. It's just been zoning staff and legal counsel that have worked on it.
Okay, but this is from not the recent consulting group that you
Correct.
hired, but now, are they still part of
No.
being billed with? Okay, so then my next question would be, so it took a long time to bring this out. How long has it, it's a couple of years to make the changes and then say, okay, this is what we think? Or I'm just trying to figure out, when did they put this together? If they're no longer with us, when did they put this together if they were hired a couple of years
The
ago?
original document was enacted 2 years ago, year and a half ago. And that's when she was involved. And then I think it sort of sat, properly. I mean, it was on the books, was enacted. And I think staff was marinating, legal was marinating. The trustees were thinking about the operation of how it was going to work. So it has not been worked on consistently that entire time. This is a more recent, this has been worked on in the last 4 to 6 months, maybe.
I'm assuming since the moratorium was put
Yeah,
on the original
that's right.
one.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I just think it seems like they would have. I hadn't heard about it. I guess maybe because I wasn't on board at that time or what have you. Hadn't heard about it. It seems like there have been some thoughts about, or at least some conversation in the interim with us about these are the things we're thinking about, right? Or that the consultancy is thinking about. And granted, you bring it to our attention now, but it looks like there would be things that you would.
Well, I think I'd heard at one point in time, whether it was true or not, I guess I'm asking whether it is true, whether that the group that we hired, the 23 overlay, wasn't going to be a part of what they were going to work on.
No, they are not working on it. That
Two
is
separate
Two
Yeah.
separate things, right? So yeah, 23 overlay and whatever else they're going to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems to me the 23 overlay is the bigger part of each township. And also the other thing, which gets to be tough to deal with, because you got to deal with the present, not the future. But we've already heard many times, if you read to the future, Delaware County would like to eliminate the traffic somehow that's coming down 23 and take it somewhere else. Too many traffic lights, the truck traffic, all that's disturbed. I know that sits out there, because that would have an effect on all this too, but we can't do that.
Right. To an extent, an overlay district is a planning tool, right?
Yes.
It's a development tool, because that's the idea, right? You're trying to say, hey, choose if you're interested, choose this overlay. Here's because we're gonna, we've put it on the path, the spectrum of the steps a little bit further forward than other traditional planned and regular street districts. But the township, retains significant amounts of control, but also flexibility. And we've written out sort of what we're anticipating going in here to give those who are interested an idea. So to an extent, it is sort of a planning development tool, because you can literally put on paper. Township can put on paper what its vision is for the area. But you're right. Our planning development only goes so far, and none of us are, soothsayers. We can't say what some of the other jurisdictions are.
So I have a couple questions also. One of the changes was on traffic studies, right? That the versus being subject to, I guess, Delaware County or whoever else that's traffic, be subject to the township. Would that require? Do we have a traffic study expert on the staff?
Glad you asked
Would that
that.
require us to?
The township's
retain
review would be in addition to the county's review. So this is section, I'm not going to say it quick, but the section right below it says that the township may utilize a third-party engineering firm or the county engineer's office to review and approve the recommendations of TIS. So it's built in the ability to rely on someone who's, I'm a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an engineer, so it wouldn't be me. But we'd have the ability to find someone who is an expert and use them.
Developer is paying for a traffic study, and then the township with the county engineer is reviewing that traffic study.
Correct? Your understanding?
The township has the ability to hire a private consultant. So we don't.
Or the, I mean, the provision
So
is.
who is the one, who is like the traffic engineer doing the traffic study then? I'm assuming that they're hired by.
Generally, yes, and they are hired by the developer.
They're
Yeah.
hired by the developer, and then the township is reviewing it, be it in-house, third-party consultant, county engineer. But they're not doing the traffic study, it is the developer that's doing the traffic study.
Yeah, my challenge is if the township has to hire somebody, and of course that's a fence, right? I mean, they've already allegedly, well, and I get it, developers, assuming they've hired a third party that's going to do the study. So I'm just wondering what's the thought here that says, other than we don't want them to make a decision by themselves, I mean, I guess, or at the end of the day, the study is what the study is, right? So what's driving this thought that says, hey, we'd like to put a thumbs up or thumbs down? And is that part of what we do anyhow?
Yeah, so this kind of came about with the Sheets development. There was a lot of concern about the traffic pattern and the traffic study that was presented. So then it went out to legal counsel, to a third-party consultant, and they came back with different numbers and told us that the developer needed to use different numbers than what they originally used with the study that they presented to the county and to the state. That third-party consultant gave us a different recommendation than.
But who paid for that? Did the township pay for that, or did the developer pay for that?
Did we have a provision where it was a fee shift over to the applicant?
To me, that would be the greater weight, is to say, hey, if upon our review we just don't trust it or we don't have confidence in it or what have you, we'd like for us to be able to independently select a third party, or they, whatever, you can come to an agreement on who the third party is. They pay for it. Let's see what the results of that says. And if they're getting married to one another, you'll give a thumbs up. If they differentiate, then something has to change or something has to go different.
And that's kind of what our thought process was fair and kind of see, but yeah, I mean, that's a good point of making sure that they pay for it.
Yeah.
We can take a look at that.
And then that way, to me, it gives them a more sense of fairness. Now, my other thing here is there's a significant change here with respect to commercial office and that sort of thing. I mean, is there a big boom coming to town that says office and commercial spaces in demand, or what drove that?
So my understanding, and Jeff, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are certain caps on how many residential units can be in certain areas of the overlay district, and it just seemed, if all those mixed use parcels developed as mixed use, then it would be far and away over that cap that is set within the text. So this would reflect that, there will be some residential within the overlay district, but it won't be quite as overwhelmingly residential as that initial map would suggest.
Yeah, where's that? I mean, I hadn't read the whole thing, of course. Just wondering, what does that text say? What is that cap, or what is that percentage, or?
Yeah, so it's in the development text and it's per segment.
Okay.
So segment 1 is actually capped out. There's no multifamily units that are allowed in that segment. Segment 2, I believe there's maybe 20 multifamily units that are allowed, 25, something like that. It's not very many. So that's pretty much tapped out. I'm not 100% sure on segment 3. There's more available on segment 3. Section 20.031 shows the standards. So there's 400 units that were in segment area 1, 425 in segment area 2, 350 in segment area 20.0 or segment area 3.
So this, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought there was a pullback in overlay story, right, from my perspective. I think I'm missing that. When the Sheets thing came along, right? Don't we?
Moratorium.
Yeah, okay.
So the moratorium is still under effect until
Yeah.
it gets revised.
Well, so July 1st.
Okay. And, so, is there any thoughts of, revising the caps number for the overlay?
Not from staff's end, but commission thinks that's an idea. If they want to visit that. Not sure what the trustees will say when it gets to that level.
I actually like the fact that that's been cut back. I think that was one of the main complaints about the original overlay. Like some people, well, I said that was one of the main complaints about the multi-use,
Multi-uses that were predominantly multifamily housing,
multi-family housing.
but
that
without
was,
having a commercial
Yeah.
or office use with the mixed use.
yeah, that's actually a good thing that's been
Yeah, I'm
cut back.
just trying to figure out where all this.
And with some standards, with some numbers, I think that's it. I'd never heard those numbers. Sure, they always existed, Jeff, but we just didn't ask the right question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand where all the commercial activities come from.
I mean, currently a lot of it's zone commercial now. So.
Well, when I'm looking at the old map compared to the new map,
Yeah.
I like mixed use stories personally. It's multifamily, it's multifamily. At the end of the day, I'd rather see children running around. Bunch of concrete. But so just trying to understand where that fault comes from.
Yeah, a lot of it is because of the numbers. I mean, like segment 1, there's no more multifamily that can go in their units. Segment 2, there's very little. There's no need to have mixed use really in those sections.
Yeah. Is there a study on the maximum number of units that can go in these areas, assuming it was still mixed use? I mean, I understand the cap, but the cap is artificially placed there. What is the maximum number that could potentially go? Anything that tells us that, so we can say, well, we should increase it by 100 units or 100
Was that on the original consultant? Did they put together a study like that?
No, this actually came at the trustee level. One of the caps. Originally,
Because I would have a consultant probably has a better grasp of what those numbers are.
Right.
Well, and keep in mind that this is an overlay, right? So all of these properties could still seek any of your other zoning districts, any of which might be full residential, part residential, multifamily. I mean, those are still options.
But they'll still be subject to the cap, right?
No,
No,
if they don't
could.
pull down the overlay and they use some other tool, then they're,
So if they use the traditional zoning route, which is under the process of consultant rewriting anyway. Someday, exactly. We might actually have a mixed use zone. Sorry.
No, good point. So the 45 days, those changes, and just my concern there is, I know how developers think was it internal that just to get stuff processed and stuff, and that's understandable because if you get a lot of paperwork through and to get that over. So was that just we found internally we needed that 45 days instead of 30 days?
Yes, that's my understanding. Is just to make sure that staff has enough time to thoroughly go through the application, make sure that we are doing our due diligence, as well as when you're trying to schedule meetings with 5 zoning commission members and 3 trustee, board of trustee members, just that gives us a little more flexibility. And so, I certainly understand that developers see time as money, and that is true. But this is still an expedited process that I believe would still be much more expedient than a traditional rezoning process, which can take 6 months or more.
And this with the overlay district, there's no referendum here. That also helps the developer. Another 30 days. So
No, that's good. Thank you guys. Yeah, no, that was. I I just wanted clarification on that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I mean, when we get these packets in that are 200 pages and we have to have a tech review, we get the packet in on Monday, we have a tech review on Thursday or Friday of that
Yeah.
same week. We have to
Go on vacation.
back.
Yeah.
We send it back to the applicant, they correct it, then they go to the zoning commission that Thursday, then they have another couple days to get it done, to get the revisions, and then a week later they're at the trustees. So it was a 30-day turnaround from the start of the application to when the trustees heard it, and then having 4 or 5 people reviewing these plans, and we're still missing stuff. So
No, makes
it gives
sense.
us a little more leeway.
When are the trustees gonna vote on this? That had already been set.
No, it'd be once you guys make.
Yeah, the zoning commission will need to make a
So
recommendation.
we're here to make some recommendations and see what happens.
Yeah, so, yeah. When you make a formal motion to approve it or whatever. that
Follow the
goes
usual
to,
process, yeah.
Okay.
Then we'll take it to the trustees and they'll set up a hearing date and start their discussion on it.
Well, I hope we can table this a little bit so that we can think about what we're.
Yes, so we did not prepare any preset motions for you to approve this this evening. We did not anticipate that would be the case. You know, we want this to go through a thorough process of vetting it, making sure that this commission's preferences are heard, and and staff can discuss things and make some revisions as well based on your feedback.
One of my questions is, do you think we can get a guesstimation for this mixed-use story of the additional units that are capped? So if you want to come up with a recommendation and say, hey, let's add 200 more units to that.
That is something we can look into. Yes.
Yeah. We can get a guesstimation of that.
I have a couple comments. One of the new requirements is that the affected land be placed in a JED, which is a Joint Economic Development District. Can you all talk about the benefits of a JED and why it should be in a JED, and what the township and what the developer, what the bonuses of having a JED is, since that's a new provision?
Yeah, so a JED, a Joint Economic Development District, is an economic development tool provided by the state of Ohio. It is particularly useful for townships because, as you're probably aware, townships in Ohio cannot collect income tax, whether it be from workers working in a property or residents who live at a property. A JED allows a township to partner with an incorporated area, a city or a village, to collect income tax from people either working or living in that district. And then the proceeds from that income tax are split between the municipality and the township. And so that requirement is something that allows the township to bring in additional tax revenue to, in part to offset, services that these, businesses require in order to survive. Whether it be roads, whether it be infrastructure,
Safety
anything.
services.
Yeah, safety services. So that gives the township more revenue in that aspect.
Is that tax on businesses there, or the employees as well, or
It would be
anyone living there?
It would be the employees of a business or residents of that JED area. Yes.
It's both. It's income and business income. One more time. Personal income and business income. Yeah.
And then that would go to help with the facilities of that area in terms of, like you said, roads. Does any of it go to schools?
No.
Okay, so it's just basically roads, public safety, EMS services.
Yeah, and Ms. Huber, correct me if I'm wrong. There's no statutory requirement of how that money is spent. It's just general fund money.
I think to an extent it's supposed to benefit. I think it's pretty general.
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically, like you're saying, it benefits the JED area, right? It's supposed to contribute to all those things you said.
But it's not required by law to benefit
I don't believe
specifically
so.
that JED area.
All of the terms, I don't believe so. All of the terms that we're talking about right now, like who gets what percentage and where it goes and who sits on the JED board and all of those things get set up in an agreement between the entities, so between the township and whatever its partner municipality.
Okay, so when the JED is established, all those guidelines will be
Yes.
laid in place in terms of taxes and where the money goes.
That's right.
And presumably it's between the township with your legal counsel and whatever other jurisdiction entity.
That's right.
Now, is the JED only for new development, or JED could potentially be declared anywhere in the township?
Oh, it could be for any property, but a property owner has to opt into the JED. It does not. The township cannot force a property owner to join a JED.
I like that part of it.
Well, yeah,
That's the best
I think
thing
there are
to
some
do.
ways you can force based on a percentage of who you can get. Like there are some folks you can drag into,
Well,
but
I
then
was
there's
gonna say,
also an
I thought
opt-out.
the JED was part of the agreement for the overlay.
Oh, so-
But if you pull down the overlay,
It is.
your land is in a JED.
Those folks would be in it, period, full
Yeah.
stop.
Anybody who's doing traditional zoning, it's up to them. But if you're going to pull down the overlay cloud, you're in a JED.
As a term of your overlay zoning.
Okay.
Yep.
That's why I wanted to discuss.
And that's
the
why
JED.
we added it in here. Yeah. And that's not uncommon. With the townships we work with, I mean, again, it's an important fundraising tool. You don't have an income taxability. This is a way you can sort of take advantage of one of those funding sources, new money in a way, right? You don't have to move it from somewhere else where it was being used some other way. So it is a good idea to have it in text like this where you can.
It could be a first for Owens Township.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that's what I thought.
And that's not unusual either. I mean, again, townships like Orange, like other townships
Yes,
around the
yes.
central Ohio area, are kind of
Welcome
like,
to the 21st century.
we got to get this
You stay
going.
there?
So if you do the overlay, you have to opt into the JED.
Yes,
Correct.
Yeah.
that's right.
And you know, what have studies suggested when townships have applied? Well, I guess the fact that they are applying under overlay, they already knows the expectation, so it's not like it may. I guess I was trying to think of, does it prevent any development of businesses?
It's a business consideration, just like anything, is my understanding. Again, you don't have to pick the overlay. You could pick something else. But if you're going to get some of the benefits of the overlay, it's in our opinion, not unfair to ask for, it to be worthwhile for the township.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry for your own voice. Back at you.
Okay, so if we can just step back a second. So overall, high level, just looking at the maps, I think that, obviously doing the commercial office makes sense. The amount of mixed use we had in there originally was probably a little much. And quite frankly, an oversight, I think, on everybody's part in the original when we were going through that process. The process itself, or the timeline, I know you brought this up, but I am a little bit concerned about it. I mean, obviously the 14-day was not enough time for staff to review anything. I think moving that to a 45-day timeline to me makes sense, because it's the original submittal. There's a lot of work that needs to go into that upfront, part of the application and through that process. I guess unless this is something the trustees have advised on, I don't see necessarily why we increase them from 30 to 45 days, unless I'm just missing something, because this is now a 90-day minimum process for the applicant. I think even just taking that back down to 30 where it was originally would make sense, because, and I'm not saying that, their efforts in this is less important or anything like that, but I think that, a lot of that legwork is done at the front end of the application. We should have vetted through the majority of any concerns that we can present to the trustees, and I think 30 days is adequate, but I mean, I guess I'd like to hear from the rest of the board on that, if they agree with that or not. Because I think that, even taking that 15 days out would mean a big difference to applicants. Going from what was a 30-day process to now a 90-day process just seems like a big jump. And rightfully so, the front end, like I said, the 14 days and everything that we went through at the beginning, I think was way too cramped for everybody. So I don't know, I mean, what do you
I
guys
think if we do our due diligence at the beginning, I think you're correct. I mean, that's what we're here for, right? So I agree. I think if you come to a compromise, right?
Mhm.
That's my view.
Well, the overlay was designed to speed up the process for the developers a little bit. So that they came in already understanding we have to meet these criteria so that when it got here, there wasn't that much to talk about and clean up because they were already there. I tend to agree with you.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, needs to be shorter.
Yeah, I hate to go backwards, right? Too far backwards. I mean,
Well, if you go, I agree with you, if you go too far backwards, what's the incentive for the developer?
What's exactly?
I mean, the goal was to streamline this process. Now, initially, it was almost like they streamlined it too much, and the zoning commission didn't even get a chance to
and you guys don't
even
have a chance to
comment
breathe.
on it. Now, at least we get a chance to comment
Yeah.
on it, and our comments will go with the trustees along with the staff report and the Delaware County and all that other stuff. But unless I'm mistaken, everybody else, like the staff, Delaware County, and the zoning commission will have already reviewed the documentation and made recommendations on it. So that the 45 days and 30 days, I'm not sure what the value add to the trustees is.
So noted, we can take that back.
Because it
No,
gives
no,
you
fair
guys
point.
a term.
I mean, unless the
You're
trustees
more
are the
time.
ones that want the 45 days.
And we can check with
But
them.
still, I would ask, what their value add is for the extra 15 days.
Well, I mean, previously, it was 2 weeks after you guys saw it. Was when they heard it. So, it was scheduled. We had a schedule of, this is when you submit, this is when your hearing date is with the trustees, and this is when the work session is.
Mhm.
Now, this gives us a little more leeway to schedule it out,
Okay.
work around schedules and stuff. But are you wanting 45 days, cut down to 30 for both, for the
No.
first one, or
No, just
to go to the
Yeah.
trustees?
Yeah, just the
Yeah.
trustees.
exactly.
It's a compromise where you guys get what you need on the front end, but we're saying that the back end, you don't need
And we do
that.
have it written that it's within 45 days, so it
Right.
could be sooner than 45 days.
Right.
But
But it gives you that
Right.
45
this is
days.
why it gives you that leeway.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, because I think you all do need the leeway to do your due diligence to fully vet the application and make sure that it adheres to the provisions of the overlay. So,
and we had discussed 30 days also for the first step and 45, and we kind of went with 45 to give a little more leeway. But that's something that you think the developers are going to want. It turned around in 60 days. I think staff-wise, we could make that work. We made it work in a month.
Yeah, I just,
Another 30 days.
I just think that, the overlay is there obviously to promote growth and development along 23. But if this gets too restrictive, I think now we're almost encouraging just going through regular zoning because they can get it done probably in just the same amount of time at this point, assuming that it's not a complex case and it's something that can go, to the zoning board maybe twice and say that's a month apart or something, then they're moving on to the trustees. It's, what's the point of going through this? Now, I understand there's other incentives and things in there, but I just don't want to restrict, I guess, or discourage people from using the overlay. That's really why, the reason for the comment.
And one of the big benefits that most developers are going to look at is that no revenue.
Right.
So, that saves them 30 days at the end,
Correct.
no matter what.
Right.
Saves 30 days.
Right.
They're the same process.
Boy, and the
Yeah,
unknownness
yeah.
of are you gonna succeed or not? Because your application is written in stone, written in sand, neither. Right.
Mhm. Great. Go ahead.
No, there.
Hold on. We'll get to the public comment in a second. Is there
I have,
additional comments from the board?
okay, I sort of have two more. One is the whole 3-family residential unit and why they have to be minimum 2 stories in height. Is there a particular reason for that, especially if the second story doesn't have to be a real story? Why is it 2 stories and not, say, 1.5? It seems like if you want to have greater density, I understand the purpose for more stories, but then you have the provision of that you don't even have to have occupiable space on the second floor, then you're just having fake space. So what's the purpose of the second story?
Some of this is style consistency, from my understanding. Some
Okay.
of it is there are product types that are becoming more and more common, which are aimed at empty nester folks who don't want a second story.
Then why is it a story and a half?
Oh, we can look at that. We can look at that.
As opposed to a full second story. I mean, this is me from an architect background.
We can look at that. In my non-architecture background, I'm like, well, if it's a story and a half, does that become a new like definitional thing that I have to say? What's a story and a half versus
What's
two?
1.5 story?
We would have to probably define that. Essentially, you're just it's whether it's through dormers or whatever
it's
else.
just
the
a dormer.
appearance. It's the appearance of this. But yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that's a right move, like, rather than having a 2-story requirement.
Yeah, I don't think you should have a 2-story requirement if it's not habitable space.
What if it's built next to, like it's connected, it's attached to true 2-story structure? I mean,
We still have examples down the street
Okay.
off of Old State where you have 2-story townhouses and then the end units or ranch units that are story and a half. Now, whether or not it's great architecture, I won't comment on it, but I think you can make it look good if you want to.
Okay, and is just so I can, I'm asking questions from different directions to try to get it where we all want it to be. Is the idea that we've quote unquote wasted less space by not having just an empty second floor?
Yes.
Or what to you?
That, for me, that would be, why am I putting a second story on that I can't lease? If I'm a developer, why am I building a second story that I can't have leasable space in, as opposed to just having a larger truss with some dormers in it?
Okay. And I believe
Or
this matches
if
up.
I even raise it and raise the ceiling height, that's fine, but then I have to go from like 2x4s to 2x6 or 2x8 studs, or double up my studs to span that whole height. So it's gonna cost more to put the extra story on that I can't even have leasable space in.
Okay. I believe we have gotten some input from a potential developer is that accurate? In the overlay, who has sort of said that that's the kind of product they might like to do. But point well taken. I'm making notes. I will look at. I'm just saying it's not just me being like 1.5 or 2. I don't care, right? Like let's say 2.
Yeah, I mean that's
that
what
would be-
I don't think you should. I mean, if they want to do 2, that's fine.
Okay.
But I wouldn't just make it 2 stories.
So
I
say
think-
at least 1.5 is
Yeah.
what you're thinking.
Exactly.
And is it just for the
I mean, I don't
aesthetic?
know, Adam, you worked for a home building company.
Yeah.
What's your take on this?
I mean, there's obviously cost in doing a story and a half as well, but it's a lot less than if you're doing a story appearance.
Is this just for appearance sake? Is that the whole?
I think
thing that's driving?
consistent appearance, product type that we're seeing or that there is some degree of interest in, combination of factors.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with a product type interest. I want to know what it's community interest. Are we just doing it just so we can make it appear consistent, or are we just doing it to? What's the drive behind?
I think it becomes like a human scale thing. So you're going to have these developments primarily next to some type of commercial, or office. I'm sorry, or commercial, and typically you're not going to see those at a 10-foot height or something like that, like you would on a range. It's not going to be so. From a scale purpose, I think that it's appropriate to maybe, have that extra story and a half, because it's more of it's a transition. It steps to where, you kind of go from commercial, which, I mean, as you well know, even though you walk into a Home Depot or something, it's one story, but the ceiling and everything's very high, and the parapet and all that. So it's a tall structure, and then you have this, smaller thing, the smaller development next to it. It just helps with the scale, I think, a transition, and then obviously then going down to Epcon community or something like that, where there's just or single.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, a lot of the Epcons are story and a half.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe they have habitable space on the second floor, maybe they don't. But,
Yeah.
they're taller than a ranch house.
Do you have a height that you use as a story and a half? Or how do you determine the story? Just
It's usually just dormers in the roof line or something like that. But I mean, you can pick a height. I mean, standard residential height is 35 feet right now for 2 stories. So yes, standard for 2 stories, 35. So, maybe if you have that, or make it 20 or something like that. 20, 25. But, it's whatever the developer wants. I don't want to limit them.
Yeah, I agree. I think the developer present what you got, let us see what it looks like, evaluate it against the transition story, and
But don't make them do the standard 35 height.
yeah. Well, that's typically our max height. So
Which is generally our 2-story
Yeah,
with
I mean,
the
we hear-
standard hip roof or.
it actually came up with one of our overlays with the discussion from regional planning was isn't it 2 stories? Well, it was 25 feet or whatever. So we were told that the story is 10 foot, 12 foot, double that. We didn't have a definition of what a story was. The height of the there was some ambiguity there that kind of question on how do we interpret that.
Yeah, it just depends what your floor to ceiling height is in your building.
Right. So that's where you guys have that architecture background. Both sides. How do we define that, or how do we regulate what's a story, what's a story and a half, what's 2 stories, what's 3 stories? Is there a minimum height to make it story and a half?
So I have to go in the building to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And the enforcement of it is where a lot of these text changes and different changes.
And maybe, and that was actually one thing I was thinking, in some of your definitions, you like define all these fence types. You added crossbuck, but you didn't define what a crossbuck was. Define all the other fences, you should define crossbuck. But that maybe you should include images of what it is you're talking about in terms of fence types, and maybe you can include images of what you're talking about in terms of story heights, or visually what a story and a half looks like, or what a 2-story looks like, or what a 1-story ranch looks like. Does that make sense? And there, like you have images in here about, what your multifamily building is supposed to look like, or give or take, maybe if you include images of what these things are, what you're looking for. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's part zoning code, part like pattern book or something, part like kindergarten story.
I mean, I think the images really help.
Right.
And we try to upgrade them from what we had originally. Try to make it a little more clear. So
maybe include that in some of your definitions, and include that in what we mean by story and a half or 2-story or whatever. Just a thought. All right, I'm done. You don't need to hear me anymore.
All right, any other comments before we go to public comment? All right, at this time, we'll open it up to public comment. Anybody wishing to speak, please state your name and address.
Hi, Mark Freeman, 478 Glenside Lane in Powell. I'm actually an associate member of the board, but I'm not in that capacity tonight. There's several things I wanted to address. One was having to do with the 30 versus 45 days. I think we have 2 situations. One is your perfect scenario where the developer, having looked at the RCOD requirements, crafts a plan that exactly meets that. And so they want that to sail through. And rightly it should. This never really happens. Okay? What happens is they come up with a plan that's really close, but they need 1 or 2 or 75 divergences. And there needs to be some time to go through those and to negotiate those. Now, I'm not saying that 30 days isn't enough time. I don't know. But it's a factor that should be weighed in deciding how much time do we really need to do that. Because sometimes a developer will present something where there's a lot of challenging divergences. And we've seen that in pretty much everything that's come in on the RCOD, and including the BJ's submission. So, for what that's worth. One of the things that I think we were all led to believe about the RCOD is it would encourage true mixed-use buildings, not just mixed-use areas. For example, if you've got a strip retail center that has a second story that's residential, kind of like the good old days when the dry cleaner would live above his shop, right? And so that was the kind of thing that I think we were expecting to see happen as a result of that. But in fact, that's not what we got. So I'm wondering if there's anything that could be modified in the RCOD to help influence that, to maybe encourage that, as opposed to just having a commercial building over here and a whole bunch of apartments over there, and having it all on the same basic lot. Because that's kind of how we ended up with Cheswick Village, which, full disclosure, is in my backyard. Was that we had a mixed use area declared for the RCOD, and because there was already the Meijer and the Home Depot and whatnot, they were able to put in a fairly substantial number of apartments, which isn't really what anybody envisioned was going to happen as a result of the RCOD. Related comment has to do with definitions. I agree about the crossbuck fence, but I think we've found that wherever we don't very precisely define something, we don't get what we intended. And so I think we've got to be very careful about that. Both by omitting things, we can cause problems, but also by overly specifying things. I think one of the things we got in the RCOD that was a surprise was the amount of multifamily developments that were being proposed, which obviously took a year or more to develop, that just suddenly hit the plate like as soon as that thing passed. So there was a lot of language put in the RCOD that kind of obfuscated the intent of the people that helped draft it. And so I think the more directly and simply we can put things, the better off we are. And if, like this over-under commercial retail thing that I was talking about, commercial residential rather, if that's a thing we're trying to encourage, we ought to say so and describe it and maybe have some pictures of it. If that's really what we're trying to accomplish. If that's not anything anybody really wants, then let's not do that. But my understanding in the original pitch for the RCOD was that was something that we could reasonably expect to come out of it. And that was absolutely not anything anybody wanted to build. So there's that. And with regard to sheets, I'm concerned that one of the reasons why we had issues with the sheets application was not that it was a gas station. It was the traffic issues that it presented being so close to that traffic light at Orange and 23. And I want to ensure that whatever changes we're making will prevent similar situations. So I know we've got more information and detail in there about the traffic studies, but let's say we had a similar intersection, and let's say Raising Cane's, to use an example, wanted to, or Chick-fil-A wanted to take a similar sized and situated lot. What do we have in the RCOD that would make that much more difficult for them? Because I don't think we want to have the kind of traffic circus that that's likely to become. So I think that's something that needs to be taken into account.
Okay, I can speak to a couple of those. So I guess what the changes that we made in regards to the traffic study, I think are the right ones, because it now encourages us to be able to use a third party if something doesn't pass the smell test. It's my understanding that, especially anything involved with 23, that we're not the only ones reviewing the traffic study, that Delaware Regional and possibly ODOT would be reviewing those, depending on where that location is.
And,
If it's
and
an
yet
ODOT,
Sheets is going ahead.
I'm sorry.
And yet Sheets is going ahead.
Well, for other reasons though, because
Yeah.
it was denied. But then, obviously, but what traffic studies, the primary purpose of them is to determine whether there's a safety issue or roadway improvements that are needed.
Mm-hmm.
So, say that a structure goes in and it's going to generate 800 trip count or whatever it is, and that then is going to dictate a light to be put there, because now there's just a stop sign. That's what the traffic study is going to be able to tell us. That now the developer, these are all hypotheticals, may have some involvement or a cost associated with that traffic light, because it's their development that's generating this need. That is it's not that a traffic study is going to come up and they're going to say you can't do this because we just don't have the capacity or something like that. Like typically what's going to happen is, well, you're generating enough traffic, you're going to have a decel lane now dedicated to your property that allows someone to properly turn in and not slam on the brakes on 23 to turn into your
right. And there's got to be physical space for that line.
Right. Or maybe an access point gets relocated. It's not gonna prohibit, and I don't think that's what you're saying, Sheets from ever being built, and I'm only using them as an example because you did, but it's not going to prohibit a development from going in. It's just going to dictate how the access points are, whether there's a traffic light or however, it's roadway improvements essentially. So I think that going forward, obviously we're going to, just like in Sheets, there was some questions about it, and we were able to get a third party to review it. I think that that's going to set a precedent going forward, that if something doesn't seem right and they're showing a low trip count for something that we know, like a Chick-fil-A, for instance, as you mentioned, that there's a lot of people going in and out of those, that maybe something doesn't pass the smell test. So we hear your concern. I think there was some lessons learned in that application and just this whole process that we can continue to improve on, and I think that's what we're doing.
Again, my point there is that if we've got lessons learned from that, let's make sure that we're specifically as possible addressing those. Like in the Sheets example, the thing that came to my mind when I first heard about that was northbound traffic on 23 turning left onto Orange and then having to turn left to get into the Sheets parking lot. But you've got eastbound traffic coming down Orange that wants to make a left turn to go northbound on 23. You've got these crossing streams of traffic, and it's really close to the intersection. So, like you were talking about, a decel lane or something, there needed to be like a center turn lane or something there, and there just isn't any room for it. Plus, you get the issues of cars potentially backing up southbound that want to get into the sheets, but somebody's very slow to get out of a parking spot. Things are backed up. We could have traffic backed up into the center of that intersection when there's a red light there and cause ourselves all kinds of mischief. So that's the sort of thing where if we want to avoid that situation, we need something specifically saying that that's a situation we don't want. You know, the entrance way has to be at least X number of feet from a traffic light, that sort of thing.
And there are codes and restrictions on those things that are already in place. What we heavily rely on, and you know, none of us are traffic experts, and nor should the township have to hire one on and incur that cost. I think that what the solution is Delaware Regional is, when they review these, they give us comments almost every time on the traffic studies. So we do rely on them heavily to direct us on, you know, the information that's provided. Now, I think all of us have some experience reviewing these, and whether that's through a profession or just from being on the board a certain amount of time, that we're able to identify certain things, but we're not the experts by any means. So I think that, you know, to answer your question, I think what, you know, obviously needs to happen is we communicate these things to Delaware, which we have, and I think continue to do that and say, look, we're concerned that, you know, this particular property might you know, cause some backups or stuff like that. Can you, you know, based on this traffic study, you know, do you foresee that happening, or is there a better way to do this? Because I would say that for us to try to direct that, it's probably not appropriate because we just don't have the professional experience.
And just to reassure you, District 6 with ODOT is probably the strictest in the state on traffic flow. So you do have a district up here that is probably the strictest by far in the state of Ohio. So,
but yeah, I mean, I would say we definitely share the same concerns. We're not disagreeing with you by any means. If I can, moving on to the mixed-use, multi-story concept that you mentioned, I think it would be hard for us to drive, you know, something like that specifically to where, you know, we're saying that you have to have a first story retail and a second story residential or anything like that. Me personally, I'm not speaking for the entire board here. I completely agree with you that I think that, you know, this, you know, we're going to have a store here, and then over here is going to be some, you know, a multifamily, and we're considering this a mixed use, you know, property. I think that they need to be more integral, and I think there's ways that we can do that. You know, I'm hopeful that, you know, with everything going on in Evans Farms, exactly what you're saying is going on there, where there is first floor retail and residential above. I think that, you know, once people catch on to that and see that, it's going to encourage that type of developments here. And I would say that you know, we can take a look at that and certainly try to put something in the code. But I think being prescriptive to the point of saying, like, we need to do this, I don't know if that's necessarily the right path. But I hear what you're saying. I completely agree with you on it, because I feel that, you know, we shouldn't just take a development and then just throw a bunch of you know, and not have them connected in any way. Like that's where I struggle with, and maybe the board agrees, maybe they don't, but I sure happen to agree with you on that one. And then the last comment, or I guess going backwards, the first comment you had in regards to the timeline, I just want to understand that I understand what you're trying to say is, you know, we went from 14 days on the staff review to 45, which is a big jump.
Yeah.
You know, my comment, or at least probably what you heard, was primarily in respects to, I think that the front end is going to be more strenuous in the point, and from the perspective of, you know, we're getting all the information in, we're gathering it, we're you know, coming up with, you know, what the divergences are and figuring all that stuff out. By the time it gets to the trustees, you know, it should be to a point where, look, we're pointing out the highlights, we're giving you the important things that we think you need to pay attention to, or giving you our concerns, and then, you know, what maybe we like about this particular overlay, you know, property or you know, development that's going on. And at that point, the only reason why I felt that to reduce that back down to 30, what we had it before at the trustee level, was only because, all of that stuff would have been vetted through at the beginning.
Yeah.
Hopefully by the time it gets to them, they still have the same amount of time they had before, which I think is enough, appropriate time. I'm not trying to cut it down to, where developers can just come in and ran stuff through this township, and we never get to really.
Yeah, the original
Yeah.
14 days was,
It was aggressive.
that was rough.
Yeah, it was aggressive, and I think we made the right changes there. So hopefully that answers your questions. And if anybody else has comments, feel free to respond. I don't know. I didn't mean to speak for everybody.
No,
But-
I mean, I agree with the whole mixed use idea. The issue being is, and that's what I do for a living. I do mixed use, and it's mostly in the short north or other areas of Columbus where real estate is at a premium, and it makes sense to do something like that. I'm not sure we're quite there yet on 23. It'd be nice if we were, but we do, I agree with Adam, to do something that would integrate more of the multifamily with the business or commercial use. So that you can walk to an office, or you can walk to a grocery store or a restaurant or something like that. Now, how to go about doing that, besides like maybe showing more examples, I'm not sure, because I don't want to define something so strictly that it's going to actually discourage innovation and thoughts. But to do
Exactly right. I don't think we ought to be doing anything to say, you have to do it this way. But I think we can do something to sort of use the code to advertise that as an attractive option for them to just, have a seed planted. Like the Kroger shopping area on 23. If that were to be developed today new, you could have the Kroger there, but that whole strip of restaurants and retail there could be 2 stories of residential above that, and it could look really nice. And I think people would enjoy being in that space, living there. And it would give us some relatively low priced housing. Because most of the cost of those buildings would be in the first floors. Adding a couple of stories of residential would add a tremendous cost. And we'd be able to see maybe some places where people that actually work at the Kroger would have a place to live in the township. Because that's definitely an issue here. I mean, we don't want to see, 15-story apartment buildings in Orange Township. But the people who work here have to have a place to live.
I absolutely agree with you on that, and certainly, and I like what you use, the word innovation. I don't know how we spell that out to encourage that, certainly as I try to encourage, going back to grabbing back some of this mixed-use story here, suggesting or encouraging what we're looking for, great innovation in space, and I think you be upfront with developers and say it's not innovative enough that clearly speaks to true mixed use, then it's not going to make it. It's not going to get through the board. So, and you're absolutely right. People who work at Kroger's ought to be able to afford their life.
Yeah. Well, and if we look at the most recent thing that's gone through is the BJ's mixed use development, there really isn't any integration there. Now, I know they didn't come in under the RCOD, but if they had, and they might well have if it was in place, what would be said about that? It's not really integrated in any way. It's again putting apartments over here, and in that case, a big commercial building over here. And somehow, even though we keep talking about how we don't want gas stations on 23, and we're putting that in the RCOD, we recommended for approval the BJ's with a gas station on 23, and gave them divergences for the signage. So I'm confused
Well, this just came in as far as prohibited gas stations. That was one
Yeah.
of my questions. Is this going to work from now, since it's now prohibited? It was already approved. But yes, you're right. That would not have been approved. BJ's came in today, if this was already an approved thing, it wouldn't
Yeah.
qualify.
They wouldn't qualify in the previous spec.
Right.
Yeah.
No gas station.
But it came under traditional zoning, not the all.
Yep.
They still do traditional zoning, and you are correct, there were a lot of. Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, Mark, I appreciate the feedback. I think that we'll definitely take it into consideration. I think that what you said that I've actually brought up before and I agree with is the best way to, the best zoning code I've ever seen in other municipalities generally has some type of imagery or something in there. And I think if we find some things that we all, really like and think that the township, that it would be appropriate here, that we maybe include those as far as, within the text. So maybe that would help some of the development, in
Yeah,
the right
I think the
direction.
original RCOD was really great in that regard in terms of the landscaping and
Yeah.
what the views could look like or should look like. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And it makes it all more understandable as to what the intent is.
Okay. Well, appreciate, appreciate the comments. So, we'll see if there's any other public comment here. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak tonight?
My name is Spencer Hagel, 330 South Parkway Drive, Delaware, Ohio, 43015. I think that we perceive things more vividly in the ways that they directly affect us. And to give you a perspective, I live in a neighborhood bordered by 23 and West Orange. It's also kind of bordered by North Orange. The old overlay kind of almost swallowed the subdivision. I know people have made arguments, if there's an open lot, you can probably expect something will go in there. What you don't expect is potentially every house that borders your neighborhood to convert commercial as part of a broad overlay. And it scared me a little bit. I wondered if there was a way you could, this might make this point a little moot. I didn't catch it. My eyes aren't that great from the back, but I wondered if you could put that. Yeah, because I seem to notice a big change in that area, and it might kind of render what I was going to say a little.
This one here.
Is it segment 2 here?
Yeah.
So you might be able to see this one a little better over here. It's a little closer to you.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
that
that.
would be
That's even
awesome.
better.
So it is even better.
You said Orange Road, right? Or is that?
Yeah, the west side of
Yep.
Orange Road. I should be better with the maps. Okay. Yeah, okay. So I guess my concern is there's a lot of lots, specifically there, that aren't bordered on 23, that butt up into our subdivision. Those aren't vacant lots. Those are houses. And what you don't expect is when you get a house that your neighbors or somebody in your backyard is going to be part of a broad overlay that just makes that conversion automatic. Everybody's entitled to a zoning hearing if you wish to change it. But I have a concern there that those are houses. They're occupied. They are not vacant lots. And if you do that as a part of an overlay, then what's stopping that from keeping on moving?
So Spencer, the map, and just for clarification purposes, the map on the left is the old map that we had under the previous overlay. That continued much further into the west side of Orange Road. If you look on the right there, and I know there's a little legend there, but you can see that that now stops at the properties at 23. So we have reduced that footprint going down Orange Road.
Oh, I understand. I guess my question is there's more lots that don't border 23 that are existing occupied residences. Out of curiosity, why would those be part of an overlay when they don't border 23 and are occupied?
Yeah, and it's not that there's going to be anything like like an eminent domain or anything like that. They're not. What this is stating is just, generally, regardless of what, the use is today, how we foresee the future. Now, this isn't like a 5-year plan or something that we intend that, whoever's left in this, it's gone. Those residences could remain there another 100 years. I mean, it's not that this isn't dictating, what that use is. So say this passes, that doesn't mean that people are going to have to start moving out or anything like that. If that makes sense.
That does. I guess my question is.
And you're saying around the residences,
yeah,
right? Is that what you're saying?
because I understand if they border 23, I mean, it's borders 23, but there's a lot of these that are existing homes that don't. So these could potentially turn into, something that, there wouldn't be a discussion about it. It's automatic. It's part of a broad overlay. So the discussion, is sort of ended.
Well, I think part of it is you have to sort of figure out, like, well, how deep is the lot? And continue that evenly. So, like, if you look at some of the lots, there might be one lot and then there's 3 across. If you have one lot that borders 23 that's going to be commercial, the lot across the street might not really work to stay a house. Maybe that lot should also be commercial. Now, it wouldn't necessarily be it on its own. It might have to be combined with neighboring lots. But it's one of those things is where you sort of have to figure out where to put the dividing line in terms of the lots that face 23. I understand what you're saying is that obviously 23 should be the commercial corridor. The residentials should be behind it. But it's not like there's a clear-cut line that says everything on one side is commercial and everything on the other side is residential. We sort of have to negotiate how to best create I don't want to say a dividing line, but how to figure out what lots. And I agree, in the past, there was a lot on Orange Road
it was obscene.
that was a little too far removed from 23, and we shortened that back.
No, don't get me wrong. It is greatly improved.
Okay.
By all means, because we went halfway down, basically, Orange Road, almost halfway down to 315.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little more concise now. Now, is it perfect? No. We do have the advantage of the sort of the access road between the residential and 23 by where we have the Township Park and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a little access road that leads into our neighborhood, and not here or there, but there's a collision center going in there. If you Google that address, it takes you through our neighborhood to get there. Okay. And our neighborhood, if you probably never driven back there, because the nice thing is the only reason to be back there is if you live there. But the roads aren't, if you're not used to there and 2 cars cross, they put divots in our yard because the roads aren't wide. We have drainage ditches. At one point, they did construction on Orange Road and had to temporarily route through it. And somebody had to put up markers because they were driving 3 or 4 feet into our yards and just tearing it up. So I just wanted to think about that the neighborhood is not scaled for.
Well, that's actually a very good point when it comes to construction traffic and how construction traffic should be maintained, but that's not really the purview of
You're talking all routes,
yeah. And I just want to make sure that if we're talking about existing residences, that we're thinking about that, because I think everyone understands, it's want to live in the middle of nowhere, move to the middle of nowhere, and then go 100 miles farther, and it'll still catch up to you. But I don't think we ever considered, houses being part of something broad like this that would just be allowed to be converted without something very specific talking about its use. So I hope, like I said, not that I can, make any changes, but I hope that we consider this kind of thing, because there's something when you buy a house, you think about, how will this vacant lot. We thought about it before North Orange. We were there in 1999 before North Orange was there. We knew that something could go there. It's a risk when you buy a house in that area, but we never considered houses being something broad that could be just converted as part of it, and the dangers and the risks and the downsides that come along. So I just wanted to put that out there to make sure we consider that.
Yeah. Speaking on that site, the Calvert Collision actually is taking up 2 parts. One has a house on it. One next point. There's currently maybe 2 parcels that have maybe parcel that have houses on it. One on the edge of Parkway, dead ends, and then around has a house.
At least four.
One getting demolished, one be here. Part down. This one has a house. They could probably more than that. Section 4, they could probably more than that. That little road that on map that stuff down on the Delaware County thoroughfare plan, they plan on that road coming. They have that coming up. Eventually, you have the one lot that has a house and then there's south of probably comes down the point.
I think it's west. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it may or may not even have a sign, just know it's there.
So those three parcels to the south, they have actually tried to sell them and advertise them as not commercial currently. They've had a lot of interest that people have, they're trying to sell the commercials. That's part of the reason why the overlays is rounded to the east is right 4 lots in that. Might have residents.
Understood, and like I said, I think the change addresses a lot of the concern, because it going so far down, it felt like we were getting swallowed.
Yeah, with that road extension that the county has on their plans for the future, I think it's part of the reason why that got included.
And like I said, I think that really a little concerned about the cut through traffic. Because if there is a cut through, that it's going to get. I can't think of any place that doesn't cut through people. Don't use it. Everybody's people are like water; they probably have to lose it. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Spencer. Any other public comments? Right, anything further from the board? Oh.
Yeah. I thought he had public comment.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
I have a concern that we're setting up a standard for the RCOD that's different than what we have for the regular zoning, which I know we're about to review and enhance. But it seems like people will be able to, and it was just my own incorrect impression, people will be able to choose whether they want to apply under the RCOD or not for the same lot. So they can choose whether, for example, we're prohibiting auto-related services as part of the RCOD, which means that if you have an auto-related service, you can just say, I don't want this considered as part of the RCOD. I'll go through the regular process and we'll be able to get it anyway, potentially. Even though we specified in the RCOD, that's a thing we didn't want. And I'm wondering if there's some way we can get more consistency so that people don't get to choose the rules under which they get to play.
So that we are going undergoing a zoning text rewrite, which I know you're aware of. And I think that those are going to be critical conversations that obviously, maybe there needs to be more of an alignment between the two, or, whether it's, maybe less restrictive, or however those conversations go. I know it's going to be part of those discussions. But unfortunately, these two things are working at different paces right now.
I was about to say, because there's a year or two where there's going to be this ambiguous situation.
Right. And that's where I think we can do what we can in the RCOD or the overlay, because that's what's in front of us, and that's what we're working on to get put back in place and move forward from that. And then obviously much bigger picture. Is doing the text rewrite. We can't. There's no way to make that process go any faster, unfortunately. So
well, we want to get it right.
Yeah. No. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So noted. Yeah. We'll definitely. Yeah.
It's a little bit the point of having a couple different options. Now, should things in a general sense be absolutely. That being said, point of the RCOD is like it's cured and sick, right? So you're going to get someone who avails themselves, hopefully, that's their property. We're just saying you get the fast track. I work some of the
Right.
customers if A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. If you don't want the fast track, you want the regular track, great. You still have the regular track. You can have that extra level oversight and follow the usual process. Both steps, usual conflict. So I don't see it as a picking the rules so much as we're going to give a couple options. I mean, it's a couple options, but there's like that carrots and sticks that go along with each that we can incentivize using that, and we're recognizing that it'll have a faster, rewind, slightly less, I wouldn't say less oversight in advance. Some of the things we want setbacks.
Yeah.
What that's worth.
I'm just thinking, like, hypothetically, if I want to open a Midas muffler franchise or a Firestone or whatever, right on 23, well, if that's going to be prohibited by the RCOD, I can just say, okay, well, I'm not applying under the RCOD. You know, I want to go through the regular rules, but there's nothing in the regular zoning that says I can't open that type of business there. So yeah, I'll go through, I'll spend the 6 months, I'll do whatever I've got to do, and then I get what I want. Except that that's clearly something we're saying we don't want. So
Here, let me add
Yeah.
the recent sheets we may not have worked as, the trustees don't like it. The trustees would not approve anything auto related coming across,
Yeah.
even if we approved it. They're going to shut it down. That's where the prohibited for the auto things really came from. That was by the moratorium. It was because of sheets and because of auto related things. So
okay,
I think you have no
that's
fears.
a great
I mean,
point.
we might not have liked it, but.
Well, I think you have no, you know,
It met the
Met
criteria.
the
Yeah.
criteria.
and right now, if somebody came in, I already know that. I already know that. Okay, great, you can do this, but your chances of getting approved are, in my opinion, based on history, may be slim. Whatever
Yeah.
happens here, whatever time you've wasted here, spent here.
I got two other things that I'm hoping are really fast, so I apologize for the time I'm taking. One is there's been a lot of chatter in Facebook groups and Nextdoor and so forth. People don't really understand what the JEDs are and what they mean, and it would be helpful if there could be a clear statement about whether or not homeowners will see property taxes or other tax increases as a result of them somehow being incorporated into a JED? Or are we saying that JEDs will never include a residential property? I mean, it just seems unclear to people.
We don't put JEDs on exclusively residential property. Mixed use, sure.
Right.
Within some parameters, but exclusively single family settlement. All it is houses, doesn't get a JED.
Even if they build a collision place in the lot next door.
I mean, the JED would be on the collision place,
Right.
not the one we talked about.
We're right.
But because it's commercial,
Yeah.
it's income tax associated with commercial, more or less, some version of commercial.
Right.
At least partly commercial. Apartments are likely, depending on how that gets categorized.
Yeah.
Really a single, like my single family subdivision is not, that's not the kind of development.
So the JED's actually a benefit to people that live in a single family situation.
It's a way of diversifying the tax base.
Right, because we're going to be paying for the traffic lights and road expansions and whatever else they need without having to go and pull from
Yeah, it takes
property
away
taxes.
from the income tax, not the income tax, but the
The
property
property
tax.
taxes.
Right, to
Yeah.
offset of the property tax.
Okay. The
I
other,
was just gonna say, it's not really the purview of the zoning commission. That's something that the trustees need
Yes.
to, and staff can bring that up with them whenever they have a staff meeting or whatever. But that's not really the zoning commission. That's more of a trustee, economic development, marketing type thing.
Right. It's been added here as again, carrots and sticks.
sure,
But if and when the trustees wanted to pursue the JED, there would be more action. This by itself, not create a JED, there would be a JED agreement
Right.
Have any conversations with the municipality?
I just know there's a lot of people that are very
Yeah,
concerned
there
about
will
it
be a
because they
lot
just don't
more.
understand what it means.
There will be a lot more conversation meeting
Yeah.
about it if it
Maybe it ought to be defined in a newsletter.
Yes. My final point, I promise. One thing I would like to see in the new zoning code and in the revised RCOD is some specification as to buffers when a non-residential property is abutting an existing residential property. For example, let's just take the Sheets because it's convenient. There is a residential property on Orange Road directly to the west of the Sheets property. And they're going to put like a little line of trees and shrubs there, but they're opening a car wash right on the other side of it. And the noise from those blowers is going to go right through the little trees that they want to put in there. Personally, I just feel bad for whoever has a house there or wants to build a house there. I mean, I don't even know if that's an occupied lot or not. But just in general, I think when we're putting in anything other than single-family residential that's abutting existing residential, we should be providing some rules as to what a minimum buffer might be in terms of depth, height, density, something.
I thought we already had one in the zoning code, 50 feet for commercial use from a residence.
Yeah, mounding, and I think it's mounding and landscaping. But
There's landscaping and there's a chart on craft setback.
Uh-huh.
There's this is the between, but in designated farm residential, commercial, 100 feet. And there's also landscape.
Okay, so my property is diagonally behind the Myers loading dock. There is a very large mound between them and me, which does nothing. Acoustically, it does nothing. And I've heard people testify here in previous meetings about how sound won't go up and down a hill. That's not possible. Well, it does. Every time somebody slams a truck door, I hear it in my bedroom. It's not terrible. It's livable. I'm not going to move. But just having that mound there doesn't solve the problem. People that were talking about, I forget the name of the development that's going in, the multifamily, where there was an abutting set of condominiums and other residential around there, and some woman was saying that she had concerns in the meeting about that sort of buffering, and they're like, oh well, yeah, the existing tree line, we're gonna leave that alone. We're not gonna touch that. But you don't know how much that existing tree line is really going to do for her. I mean, in terms of the acoustics. So having a visual barrier there is great, but like what Sheets is going to put in, I'm not even sure is going to be a good visual barrier. It's certainly not going to be a good acoustic barrier, and it's just something we've got to consider. That's all.
thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. All right, Robin, is there schedule 6th?
Yes, we do. We have one application.
So, I mean, I don't know if we want to What would be the next one would be the, no, I know, but after that.
That would be the one. May
Okay.
May 10th.
Okay, okay. Anybody have any issues with the 26th?
This one?
Yeah, to continue.
We have one area that evening.
How long was this?
Sierra had her baby, didn't she?
She did.
Yes, you probably will.
Yeah, that's
fine. Good? Do you think that gives everybody enough time? Any concerns with that? Okay. So can I get a motion to continue the RCOD amendments hearing on April 26th at 6:30 p.m.? Yeah, that's Tuesday, right? Yeah, Tuesday, the 26th, 6:30 p.m.
Township Hall.
at Township Hall. Old one. Great. The second?
Second.
Adam, sorry. Can you remind me of how to say your last name?
Pahovich.
Pahovich. Thank you. Mr. Pahovich.
Yes.
Mr. McNulty.
Yes.
Mr. Bellis.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yeah.
Mr. Beer.
yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now on to meeting minutes. First ones we have up here, lingering August 28th, 2021, Evans Farm minutes, which I think we had in a previous meeting, but we didn't get the minutes in time for them. So does anybody have any comments to those? No comments?
No comments.
All right. I'm going to make a motion to approve the August 28th, 2021 Evans Farms zoning application ZON 21-05 and ZON 21-06 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Pahovich.
Yes.
Mr. McNulty.
Yes.
Mr. Bellis.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Beer.
Yes.
All right. The next ones here are the January 25th, 2022 organizational meeting that we had. And ZON-21-07.
That was Hidden Ravines Crossing.
Hidden Ravines, yes, that's what it was. Comments?
I have none.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the January 25th, 2022 organizational and Hidden Ravines zoning application ZON-21-07 meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Pahovich.
Yes.
Mr. McNulty.
Yes.
Mr. Bellis.
Staying.
Mr. Pierce. Mr. Beer.
Yes. Next are the February 8th, 2022 Hidden Ravines meeting minutes. Comments?
I was gonna comment, that technically now they're no longer minutes, they're a journal of actions.
That's, yeah.
And, I have nothing, I'm okay to approve this one, but I have a few comments for the next one. Journal of actions.
Call this journal of actions.
Or there's must be a, maybe just call it a journal. As opposed to
Does that
minutes.
matter? Does it matter? We We
Because
did
the
go-
format
we did
has
go-
changed.
we
The
did go
format
from-
has changed.
Yeah.
That's Robert's rules to a degree that degree. I don't know, so whatever your practice is, whatever. You're fine.
You will call on the age of old for now.
Okay. Slash minutes.
You can call it whatever you want. I just wanted to make the comments is that there are no longer minutes
You're
with
right.
line numbers and verbatim points made.
Now you get a recommendation to approve the February 8th, 2022 Hidden Ravines zoning application ZON-21-07 Journal of Action / meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Pahovich,
Yes.
Mr. McNulty,
Yes.
Ms. Trevellis,
Yes.
Mr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Beer.
Yes. The last one's here. March 8th, 2022 Hidden Ravines meeting. Actions.
Actually, I have two issues with the Journal of Actions. There were two issues I had with the applicants and their statements. One was regarding the discussion of the light pole height and the divergence they requested. They stated that the light pole height they needed was due to safety, and they outlined it in an email. I disagreed. That was never noted in the Journal of Actions, that I disagreed with them. As an architect, if I have a problem with my photometrics, I need to add more poles, or I need to change the head on said poles, not make them higher. That's no reason for divergence. So I want to go on record stating that I disagreed, and that was not in the, that was not in the Journal of Actions. The second point that
Are you asking that?
I asked that the Journal of Actions be revised with a statement similar to what I just said. I'm sorry, but that is a personal point of mine. The other point I had in that meeting was regarding the building elevations and the materials that were going to be used on said building. We asked for more architectural features. They provided some pilasters, but they did not improve the materials. We referred to the example in New Albany where it was going to be based in brick. I suggested it could be based in a material such as spec brick or something equivalent, but to make it look less like a warehouse, and that the applicant did not accept that. So they did not, as far as I was concerned, enhance the architectural features to my satisfaction. So I wanted that to be a point as well, because I was the one person on the commission that rejected the application. I wanted to be on. So. Besides that, I'm good. Sorry.
Any other comments? Okay. Now you get a recommendation for approval of the March 8th, 2022 Hidden Ravines zoning application ZON-21-07 meeting minutes / journal of actions as amended.
So moved.
Mr. Pahovich,
Yes.
Mr. McNulty,
Yes.
Ms. Trevellis,
Yes.
Mr. Pierce, Mr. Beer.
Yes. Okay. Other items?
There are no other agenda items.
All right. Meeting is adjourned.
Thanks. Point of reference, I wanted it to be understood.
Good. That's on record.